I wanted to preface this video with a little introduction before you dive into the actual experience that I share. So I recorded these videos one day after the 10-day Vipassana retreat, and I originally created them just for my family and friends because I didn't want to have to keep repeating the experience over and over and again. I felt like that would take away from some of the impact, like it would sort of water it down every single time I would have to share it. So I figured the easiest way to share my experience with all of them was to create some videos. My intention was to create one short video, and of course that's not what happened. So while this video is longer than I intended, I go into pretty great detail of my experience, especially the first part of it. And so I just wanted to preface with, the videos that I created that you're about to watch, like I said, were created for family and friends, just to share with them my experience. I hadn't actually planned on sharing this like on our YouTube channel or with the public. However, now a week post-retreat, I've had, quite a few people ask me about it and want more information about it. So I figured I will put it out there and maybe that will answer any questions. At the end, I'm going to share a few things too. So make sure that you stay till the very end because I'm going to record another video that I'll attach to the end that answers like specific questions you may have if you are thinking about attending, and a couple other small things that I wanted to share. So stay tuned to the end. So if you are, like I said, thinking about attending a Vipassana retreat, I can hopefully clarify for you any questions that you may have.
Okay, so I figured it would be easier to record a video to explain my experience at the 10-day Vipassana retreat and give that to anyone that wants to hear about it, as opposed to retelling the experience and story over and over and over. So I guess I'll start here. I'm going to try to make this video not too long and still cover the vastness of the experience. So I'm going to start by saying a couple of things. Number one, I didn't know what Vipassana was going into this. I mean, I knew it was like a silent retreat, but I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't know hardly anything about Buddhism, and I didn't even really, I think, know that Vipassana was associated with the Buddha and Buddhism. So going into it, like I said, I had really no idea what I was getting into. All I knew was like a lot of meditation and silence, which for me didn't seem like a big deal because I like to be in silence. I don't like being on my phone anyway. I don't necessarily love talking, so that part didn't seem like a big deal to me. Okay, so there's that. So when Scott was driving me there, it was a 4-hour drive here, there was a lot of talk about me not staying the whole 10 days. And I will not blame him, but I will say he was very insistent that he would come pick me up at any time, that I did not need to stay the full 10 days there. So on the way there was a lot of that, like a lot of just talking about, I don't need to be there the full 10 days. And so I would say going into it, I didn't have like a super strong determination or like I have to stay all 10 days. I didn't go into it with that. The other thing I didn't go into it with, as opposed to things I've done in the past, is, well, two things. I didn't have, like before in my journey, I would do things to prove to people that I could, like to prove myself. It was just one of my patterns I played out a lot. Like to prove, look how strong I am, look how much I can accomplish, look how much I can do. And, when we went through our ketamine journey in the last year and a half, that mostly has gone away. So I remember hearing a podcast once that a guy was talking about his spiritual awakening, and he was like entrepreneur and like super high achiever. And when he had his awakening, he realized he was doing all that to prove, to people. And I always remember him saying, when you actually like accept and love yourself for who you are and you go through awakening, you don't have to prove yourself anymore. You will lose your drive. Like not all of it, but you'll lose a lot of it because you don't really care anymore. I mean, not like I don't care. I care about me pushing myself, but I didn't have that. I also didn't have, like, when we went to the ketamine retreat and when I would go to Dr. Joe and these other things, I was in a place in my life where I was like struggling. I was unhappy and I was really wanting to change things. And that wasn't the case going into this. I was really in love with my life. I love my relationships and my job and, everything I'm doing and where I'm living, just everything. I was, pretty happy. The only intention really when I went into it, honestly, was to quiet my mind, because I did notice that even though I meditated daily, I had one day a week where I turned off my phone. I turned my phone on airplane mode every night, didn't turn it off, until 9 sometimes the next morning. I practiced presence when I was eating. Like, I had all these things in place, but my mind was still going a lot and work was getting a little bit stressful again. Just feeling frustrated with that and everything. So, my intention was just to be able to quiet my mind more, like when I first started meditating, or at least first started going to Dr. Joe workshops. So there's that. I lay that down for you. So we get there, and the moment we get there, I want to run. Like, part of it, I'm sure, was PTSD from going to Mexico. I don't know if any of you are watching this that you all should know, but when I was 16, I went to like a girls' treatment facility, behavioral health facility down in Ensenada, Mexico for 10 months. There's a documentary on Netflix about it, actually, about the kids that were, they only mentioned the one in Ensenada that I was at, but the movie that the main one was about was in Minnesota or something like that. Anyhow, so it was kind of PTSD from that, because it was sort of the same premise. You couldn't talk to anyone. I'm getting dropped off by somebody I love. I don't want them to go. I don't want to be there. It just, even the girls area, the girls building where the girls sleep, because they separate which was another thing. They separate the boys, the men and the women. The quarters where we stayed even reminded me so much of, like our beds and where we stayed in Mexico. So that was kind of right away, like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. I was pretty nervous. And then I saw a woman walk in that was like helping me register, and she just seemed so sweet and so full of love. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'm supposed to be here. So Scott ends up leaving, go to the room, empty. Every room is set, like you walk into the room, it's just like a big building with a main hallway that's right in the middle, and on each side of the hallway is rooms, and the rooms are tiny. All that's in the rooms is 2 beds right next to each other. Basically, there's a sheet that you can pull to separate the 2 beds, and there is a bathroom, with a door on it for each bedroom, but they're really tiny. And so when I thought I was going to have a roommate, but I knew everybody was supposed to be there by 5 to register. And so I didn't have anyone in there. And I thought, oh, thank you, God, I don't have a roommate, because I really did not want a roommate. I wanted the room to myself. Long story short, we go to dinner. They walk us through the logistics. And then we go in the meditation hall at 8, I think. And from 8 to 9, you do your first meditation. And after that, you take the vow of silence. There's, no talking, gesturing, nothing for the next 10 days. But that Chinese woman that I saw, she was basically like the teacher's aide. So she stayed with us in the women's hall, and we could talk to her. So she was sort of a liaison between us and the teacher if we had questions, whatever. So we could talk to her, but not just like about anything, only if we had questions. So anyway, as I saw women arriving after 5, I went to go talk to them to make sure they weren't in my room, because the one lady said, talk to your roommate before you go to silence, so then you can figure out like showering schedule and everything like that, because you can't even gesture to each other after that. So it makes it difficult with your roommate to figure those things out. but no one's coming. So I thought, thank you, God. I'm supposed to be here. I have the room to myself, like sigh of relief. So we go in at 8. The Goenka, the gentleman that opened all of these facilities and created the 10-day courses, he's now dead. So they play a video of him. And so basically there wasn't a lot of instruction. The only instruction was, vow silence, the 5 precepts, and that the way that you meditate is to only focus on the breath going in and out of your nostrils. So like the only area you are to focus on is your upper lip and your nose, and just feeling the inhale and the exhale, your respiration going in and out of your nose. That's the only thing you are to focus on. You're not to visualize. You're to keep your mind focused and centered on that for the whole time. And then it ended about 9. We did a meditation and doing that. And then when I went into my room at 9, I saw someone's things written there. And I was like, fuck. So I now have to share a room, and I can't talk to her at this point. So there's no, we're just, I guess, going to have to figure it out over the next 10 days. Because there's only certain times throughout the day that you can like shower, because you're basically in meditation all day. So I was like, shit, this sucks, but I was like, okay, just one day at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time. Okay, so day 1, you're supposed to wake up at 4. They do like a gong at 4, and then you meditate in your room on your bed. You're supposed to meditate from 4:30 to 6:30. And then 6:30 to 8 is breakfast and just, taking a shower, whatever else. The facility is in Lava Springs, Idaho, so it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and purposely. And so, got up. I didn't hear the gong, so I didn't wake up until 6:30. But apparently my roommate didn't either, because it didn't seem like she had been awake. So I, get some dress, brush my teeth, and I go get breakfast. And then I just, I came back, I think, and I showered. And then at 8, we went into the meditation room and we meditate as a group in the meditation hall. It's huge. It's massive, and it's absolutely beautiful. Like as soon as you walk into it, it's like, whoa, you have your mats laying, your specific mat with your name on it that you sit at every meditation. You have in the dining hall, your name at a location that you sit at every time to keep it easier since no one's talking. And then so went in, did the 8 to 9, and it was fine. I meditate every day, and I bought a meditation chair that had a back, so I wasn't uncomfortable or anything like that. And, my mind was very busy, obviously hard to keep it focused on just the breath, because I've never really practiced meditation like that before, with no music and no, direction, whatever else. So you find your monkey mind going all over the place, and then, you bring it back, and did that process. And then from 9 to 11, you go back in your room and you meditate from 9 to 11. And then at 11, you have lunch, and then you can go walk around. So I went in 8, and I walked around a lot outside, just to whatever. And, I just kept reminding myself, one day at a time, I can get through this. If anyone can get through this, it's me. Like, I'm set up to do this. So then at 1, I thought, I kept getting messed up on the schedule. The schedule is the same every single day. So the schedule is meditate in your room from 4:30 to 6:30, breakfast 6:30 to 8, meditation in the hall with everyone 8 to 9, and then 9 to 11, it's up to the teacher to decide if you go to your room to meditate or if you stay in the hall and meditate. 11 to 1 is lunch, free time. 1 to 2:30, you meditate in your room. 2:30 to 3:30, you meditate in the hall. And then 3:30 to 5, it's up to the teacher if you meditate in your room or in the hall. 5 to 6, there's no dinner, so you only have breakfast and lunch. 5 to 6 is tea, and for new students like me who's never gone, you can get some fruit. And then 6 to 7, meditate in the hall. And then 7 to 8 is discourse, so his teaching for the evening. And then 8 to 8:45, I think, is another meditation. And then 9 to 9:30 is you can meet with the teacher and ask questions. And then go back to your room and go to bed at 9:30. So that's the schedule every single day. So I got confused because it was the first day and I thought we had to meditate in the hall at 1 o'clock. So I went in the hall at 1, but I saw hardly anyone was in there, but I was already in there. So I was like, oh shit, it must be meditate in your room. But like I said, I was already in there. So I meditated from 1 to 2:30. And then I saw at 2:30, everybody came in. So then we would do the meditation as a group from 2:30 to 3:30. At that point, at about around 3, I had been in there for 2 straight hours, not to mention the 4 hours of meditation before that. And I guess it was towards the end, I could feel myself starting to go really deep because I was starting to stay focused for longer on my breath. And what happened is what I could only describe as like a tsunami of panic, fear, emotion, overwhelming. My hands started to get like clammy, like wet. And I had to open my eyes and focus on the lady's blanket in front of me because I don't know. I felt like I was losing control. I didn't really know. I had to stare at it. I could not close my eyes and just focus on that and just try to whatever, like let it sort of pass. And I felt like it was kind of coming close to 3:30. I don't know. And then, so pretty soon the thing, it was 3:30 and I'm praying and hoping she says, go back to your room to meditate from 3:30 to 5. But she says, you all will stay in here and meditate. And I knew there was no way I could do that. They say, take a 10-minute break, go to the bathroom. And I went running to my room and just started sobbing, like terrified sobbing, as if I touched a wound, a trauma. I didn't know what. It's not like I had memory, but it was I touched something in my body that was too much for me to handle. It was like, this is way too much trauma. I'm not ready to go there. I cannot stay here. Like, especially because there's no one I can talk to. I have to do this on my own. There's no way. This is too overwhelming. I was just sobbing. And I knew that the student aid lady, the Chinese lady, would come in because she would see I wasn't in the meditation hall. So she did. And she asked if I was okay. Obviously I said no. She saw I was sobbing and she asked if I could come in and I said no. And she said, okay, I'll go tell the teacher. So a little bit later, she came back in and she said, the teacher wants to see you at 4:45 to talk to you. I said, great. So I sat there for the next hour or whatever and just sobbed overwhelmingly. It felt very overwhelming, like I couldn't handle it. As you guys know, who's ever watching this, I've done a lot of breath work. I've had a lot of experiences in meditation. I've had a lot of releases. And this was unlike anything I had experienced up to that point because it didn't feel like I could handle it at all. It felt way too deep and way too big. And I forgot to add this. Before going, when I was filling out, you have to fill out an application and you have to list everything on that application. I was going to go to one at the end of January in Lava Springs. And the teacher, the instructor that was leading that one, she wanted to talk to me a minimum 2, I think maybe even 3 times to talk about my application because I wrote down that, I had 2 suicide attempts at age 15 and 16, one at 15, one at 16. And she was very concerned with this because she said, some very deep things come up in this process. And they get nervous if anyone has any mental, disorders or has experienced mental disorders in their life. And so she, was quite concerned about it, almost to the point I wasn't sure if they were going to accept my application. So after we talked many times and I assured her that, I have coping mechanisms now and tools and people to talk to and, I'd worked through that stuff and blah, blah, blah. So there was that. And after that first night, after we did the meditation and we listened to his thing, she had me come into, there's a little room behind the meditation hall tiny little room that you can go into. And that's where you talk to the teacher. And she checked in with me that first night. It was like, I just want to check in. I know, I read your application. And it wasn't the same teacher because I changed the dates, but she was like, Belva told me, the conversations she had with you. And just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling. And I'm like, fine, it's great the first night. She's like, okay, well, if anything comes up at any moment, any time of the day, you tell Eileen, who's the little Chinese lady, and she'll come get me. So I said, okay. So at that point, that this is the next day in the afternoon. And as I'm sitting there sobbing, and then it came about 4:45. So I went up, and they were done, obviously, with at 4:45, they finished their group one. And I went in and sat down, and she was like, now you understand why Belva wanted to talk to you so many times. And I was like, yeah, I understand now. And she's, asked me some questions, what happened. And I explained to her, it's just a complete wave. Like, I couldn't handle it. It just felt like it was going way too deep. And she was like, do you want to go home? And I said, I don't know. That's the hard part, is like, part of me doesn't want to go home, but part of me thinks there's no way I can handle this on my own. I've never had to go through these deep experiences like this on my own. I've always had someone there. And, I was like, but I do work on myself all the time. And she was like, were you able to, have you watched any of the discourses like at home? And I said, no. And she's like, I really would love for you to be able to watch at least tonight's discourse, so it will give you help you have some understanding and framework and concept for, what happened. And maybe if you can stay for that and watch that afterwards, I'll check in with you. And if at that point it doesn't feel right, we'll call your husband and we'll have him come get you tomorrow morning. I was like, okay, great. At that point I felt better because it had released. So, we do, tea from 5 to 6, and then we do the meditation in the meditation hall 6 to 7. And that was fine. It was fine. It was great. Felt very focused and whatever else. And then we watched the discourse from 7 to 8. Now, had I watched that discourse the very first night, it probably would have helped, because he explained sort of what will start to begin to happen. And what will begin to happen is basically the process. They call it like the deepest surgery. Like, you're cutting open your brain, your psyche, your mind to the deepest level. And when you do this process, when you go to the deepest levels, what will come up is your deepest, what they call sankharas, what modern day people maybe might call trauma. But they don't word it as trauma because it's not necessarily just memories. It is emotions, or even a lot of times, like he said, it's not just emotions. It will come in at the gross sensation, which is like pain in some part of your body, or a headache or something like this. He's like, so you probably all experienced the day. I didn't experience the physical dense sensations. I went straight to the emotional. And, he explained, he just gave some reference and a framework for what Vipassana is, what you're doing, and what you're supposed to do when these things sort of happen. The point is to keep your observation on your breath with equanimity, meaning you watch the sensations, whatever's happening in your body as they arise. You maintain equanimity. You don't try to avert from it. You just breathe and focus on that inhale and that exhale. And then that's, what you use to get through these moments. They believe that suffering was caused by the loop of craving and aversion that all human beings experience just as being a human being. But if you can get to the deeper layer underneath that craving and aversion, and you can experience reality as it is in your own experience, then you will release yourself of suffering, and you will get off the human cycle of needing to be human. You will be enlightened, and you will be in a state of nirvana. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go into, some of that after I share these first couple days. So you can understand that. But I was like, okay, I get it. Also, in alignment with that, as I was watching him, I sort of got this feeling of like, not annoyance, but just like, you know what? I don't need another man sitting here telling me how to reach God. Like, I went through that with my Joe Dispenza days. I worked through that. I don't, you know, 2 years before, I would have jumped in as like, I'm the number one student and look how great I am and follow the rules and do it. And, this time it was like, yeah, what I came to understand was I was using my discernment and wisdom in the process. And I wasn't just automatically giving you could say power, but I wasn't just giving myself away to yet another guru. And so there was that side of me that was like, you know what? I love my life. I, do I really need this? And do I really want to listen to this another dude, in this guru position? But there was a sense of like, he was kind of funny and, charismatic as spiritual leaders can be. So there was both of those voices when I was listening to him. And I just finally decided that if I decided to go, I would be okay with that. If I decided to stay, I would be okay with that. That I was just okay with whatever decision I made. And when she wanted to check in with me, obviously after the discourse or the teaching. So once that was over, I went and met with her in her room, and she's like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, much better. That helped, a lot. Let's just play it by ear and keep going. And, she said, this process isn't for everyone. And she said, there is a point that you will learn and he will teach about the power of using our own wisdom and discernment and knowing what is best for us. And, that's sort of self-care and knowing what that is. So there's no shame if you have to take care of yourself and you have to go. So I was, I was like, yeah, we'll take it, just play it by ear. But I felt better at that point. So we go back to the room. I get ready for bed. I lay down in bed, but the light's still on. And then my roommate comes in after me and she goes in the bathroom and does her stuff. I'm already laying in bed. And she went to turn off the light. And as soon as she turned off the light, another massive surge of panic, fear, felt like I was losing grip of reality. It felt like almost like a PTSD from when I was a little girl at my dad's house, when I would be terrified at nighttime in my room because I thought things were in there, because I had a very active imagination. And it was as if I was in that moment again. And even talking about it now, I can feel the sensations. It was like terror, just complete and utter terror. And so I sat up and I had to stare. There was a little bit of light coming underneath the bedroom door. I had to stare at that light for probably a good, 10 minutes, just to keep my focus on the light and to calm myself down and to get a grip on reality and just breathe my way through it. And it was, pretty terrifying. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to keep doing this for 10 days, if this keeps happening. So still, I was, finally went to sleep. I woke up at 4 the next morning. I meditated in bed from 4:30 to 6:30. And when I got up at 6:30 to go get breakfast, I felt so weak, like I could barely walk. I was just like, oh, I can't. I just felt so weak. I go into the food hall and we did have coffee, which was great. I get some breakfast and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the floor and it's kind of like spots of blue paint. And it looked like all of a sudden the floor started to move, like when you're on psychedelics. And I was like, oh my God, like I am losing reality. I'm just losing my grip on reality. Like I can't even hold reality right now. And so she wanted to meet with me before 8, 7:45, before the 8 to 9 meditation sessions. So I went in there at 7:45 and, she said, how did last night go? And I told her what happened. And she was like, I think that you should probably go. And I just started bawling and I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to give up. Like, I don't understand. I believed that if anyone could do this, it would be me. And, I was just sobbing because I was just disappointed and I just couldn't understand what was happening. I couldn't understand why it was so intense. And she really helped explain it and really helped me to understand. She said, I think what has happened is because you've done so much work and you were already so open, you went so deep, so fast that you now, if you had been here 4 or 5 days, at that point, he really walks you through how to work through that process when it happens, because you're doing it alone. And she said, most it takes 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10 days before they really get to that depth, the depth of the mind, where those deep sankharas are. And it's not like I said, I was having memories. It was just visceral, intense fear and terror and emotion and losing grip of reality. I mean, I was literally, and she's like, we can't have that. Like, you can't have that, because then you won't be able to focus and get through the moments that are tough. And, she's like, I'm the one recommending this, and it was very sweet. Although I know if I would have said, I want to stay and work through it, she would have let me, obviously. But, she's like, this is part of the path. It's part of wisdom, and it's part of discernment. It's part of knowing what is good for you and what is not. And this just may not be obviously good for you. And that's okay. That's a good thing. And so we called Scott. She talked to him. He said, of course, I'll be there. I'm 4 hours away. So I'll be there about 1:30. So, she said, go back to your room. She'll give you your phone back. You can get on your phone. You can read, whatever. You don't have to meditate. But I didn't want to, so I went back, I packed my stuff up, but I sat there on my bed and I meditated the whole time. She brought me my phone. I didn't want my phone. So Scott came and got me. We drove home. I told him about the experience, and I was like, I want to continue this at home. Like, I want to give this process a shot. I just don't think that I could do it in that environment. And I don't think that I can do the meditating 11 hours a day, but I want to keep with it. What I came to realize, like, the next day, I remembered that, number one, I already have a very thin veil because of everything I've done and because of all the meditation that I do. All of it has, everything I've done has led to having a really thin veil, on top of being a natural born quadrant 4, for those of you that, know what the quadrants are, which means I'm already susceptible, obviously, to mental illness, because I came in with having a thin veil. I came in with having a very open and active third eye and crown. And that's why I had such an intense imagination as a child. And what I realized was that the pineal gland, which is part of the third eye, regulates your sleep and wake cycle. And so when you're going to sleep, it releases melatonin, which those of you who are watching this that know the Dr. Joe work knows that can be basically transformed into secreting DMT from your pineal gland and having these psychedelic-like experiences. And because that first day I was closing my eyes and in meditation so much, my pineal gland was obviously thinking it was nighttime. And because of what we were doing, it was releasing DMT. And that's what was creating like a psychedelic experience without taking any psychedelics, which was really scary for me, because I wasn't taking anything. And yet I was, sort of like what happens in a psychedelic, where things become wavy. You have no control. You're losing sense of, reality. And the process has to be done with discernment and wisdom and humility and respect. And for me, in that environment, meditating 11 hours a day is not good for me. So I realized that the next day, and I was like, thank God I left. And I actually used what she talked about and what I had been preaching about for the last 2 years, which was wisdom and discernment, my own wisdom and discernment. I later found out in watching his discourses that is what they preach, that Buddhism and Vipassana specifically is all about you not just believing because someone is telling you, but you having your own experience so that you can make your own mind up, so that you can have your own wisdom. One of their main foundations is wisdom. So, and that only comes through your own personal experience. So the whole teaching, the whole path is all about your own personal experience and not to just listen blindly, not to devote yourself blindly to anyone. I came to also find out Buddhism is not a religion. They don't even believe in God. I didn't find that out till after the thing was done. So I didn't know that the whole time. So, I felt good that I was using those things, and I was like, I want to do this, but I'm going to have to do it on my terms. And it felt like sort of a stepping stone for me, or a mile marker in my own personal journey of getting to a place where I have that sort of sense of discernment and wisdom, and not just, believing anyone, having some mental capacity and some critical thinking, and, not so much to where I just don't do anything or don't believe anyone, but having a healthy skepticism going into something. And that's what I was experienced and hadn't ever experienced before, because I didn't really have that before. So I was like, good job. The other thing was, again, I didn't care. I didn't have anything to prove to anyone. So it's not like I cared, like, oh God, I'm going to be, such a disappointment. There was disappointment just for me on my end, but none of like, oh, everyone's going to be so disappointed. I didn't have any of that. So I decided I would continue to do the work. They call it, you go to work in your meditations at home. So I found that I could watch the discourses on YouTube every night. So I continued, obviously I talked with Scott. Saturday we did take Murphy to a dog park for an hour. But other than that, I would go and wake up. This was my, well, you can see that. This was my home. I had a bowl there in case I puked, because I would get really nauseous. That was my home for the next, 8-9 days. So I'd wake up, go straight in the morning, meditate for 2 hours, and then take a break, eat lunch, shower, whatever else, come back in for another hour and a half, 2 hours, take a break. I began writing a book, which is also against the rules. If you're there, you're not to bring any writing material. But I just had this overwhelming inspiration for a book. So I started it. I started writing it on my breaks in between. And I learned, so that was my schedule, and then in the evening I'd watch his discourse, then meditate. So it was in here meditating average about 5 hours a day. So about half, 5.5, about half of what they were doing there. And the first 3, well, it ended up for me being the first 4 days, because I didn't know until I watched the discourse. But typically on the 4th day, so the first 3 days are just focusing on your breath going in and out. And, he talks about in the discourses as the days go on, these sankharas that come up, how you are going to want to quit all of the time. Your mind's going to tell you all of these things. Your body's going to hurt. Every moment you're going to want to, you're going to want to quit. But the discourses are like your lifesavers. They're like, you hold on to them, because every night the teachings sort of build on each other, and they make so much sense, and you understand what's happening. And as they say, you're understanding it at your own experiential level. You're not giving, just believing someone just to believe someone. It's a very practical approach. Buddha was just a man at the age of 35 that became enlightened. And he was very practical and scientific. And what he wanted was an actual technique that helped free people from their suffering. So not just philosophy or dogma, but an actual philosophy, a framework, a tool that people could use in their life, and everyone could use. So it didn't matter if you were part of a certain tradition or religion. It wouldn't matter. You could do this no matter who you are or what you were. You didn't have to believe in anything. It wasn't a belief system necessarily. It was a way of life. It was a way of being. And Vipassana was a tool and a technique. And as he taught Vipassana, the way he teaches it is the purest form of Vipassana Buddhism. It's the purest that comes straight from Buddha. There's been lots of other branches off of it that he says aren't in the purest form. This is the purest teaching in the purest form. And there's 5 precepts that you live by. There are, there's three foundations. The first foundation is morality. So the 5 precepts, which are don't lie, don't kill anything, don't steal, don't do sexual misconduct, and don't take any intoxicants. And then the second one is samadhi, which means control of your mind, basically being able to control the monkey mind. And then the third one is experience, wisdom, being able to actually experience it for yourself to gain wisdom. And so you build on those, each day. And so as I said, each day, he talks about day 2 and day 6. So I knew day 2 and day 6. Day 2 obviously was the day I left. And he says that's the day most people will want to leave so bad, because their minds, their monkey minds, that part of you that just does not want to let go will, convince you that he's the devil, just all sorts of things, which of course was happening to me. And, so day 3 was kind of settling into it. I could feel myself going deeper, and I could start to feel these sankharas, these moments coming up. And I knew that, one of my biggest fears since I could remember was losing my mind. That has always been one of my biggest fears. So as I started to listen to the discourses and learn more, I started to understand that was just a fear of the mind, of the imagination, because I had such an active imagination. And so I had to work this process and work through that. And I mean, like I said, you're sitting all day and you don't have anyone to share. You have no distraction. And so you have nothing, you are coming up against yourself, and there is nothing to do about it. And as I said, I've done a lot of work. I compare like Vipassana and Dr. Joe retreats, because I've been to a lot of Dr. Joe retreats, and that was such a big part of my journey. Like, this is the best way I use to explain it. So if you're a skier, Dr. Joe is like, going to a Dr. Joe event is like going to Vail. Like, sure, it's a massively huge mountain that you can ski, but there's a lot of people there, and it's very froofy. It's very, it has lots of amenities. It's, you're not going there just to ski. You're going there because of all the treasure troves of whatever. Now, if you're going to a mountain to ski, you're going to go to Powder Mountain in Utah, which is massively huge and beautiful terrain, but no one knows about it. So it means hardly anybody's there, and they have nothing. They have 2 tiny old little lodges that just have one room. There is no fanciness to it. There's no village. There's nothing. It is a skier's mountain. Like, you're going there to ski. That is Vipassana. Only, like, imagine if you were being tortured while you're skiing at Powder Mountain. It is, if Joe or other spiritual teachers or meditations is all about going out of the body, this is about going to the deepest depths in the body, literally. Like, the deepest hell, your deepest fears. There is no hiding from all of it, and you are coming up against it. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I was doing it from home and meditating about half the time they were. And hats off to those people that do it there. I could have done all the other stuff for sure. I could not do meditating for 11 hours a day. I couldn't. It is, I was telling my daughter last night that unfortunately, I don't know if I want to use unfortunately, but sadly, this technique would help every single person on this planet, because it's so applicable to everybody. However, most won't ever learn it, because I don't think a lot of people could make it through that. I mean, they call it boot camp for a reason. It is hell. It is like, and it's kind of a pros and cons of me doing it from home, because in one way, if you're there, you have to do it. You have no way out. If you're at home, I have to have my own self-discipline. Nobody knows. I'm not really talking to Scott. I wasn't really sharing anything with him. So no one knows if you're actually doing it except for you. So you're only held responsible to yourself, which for some people, if you don't have a lot of self-discipline, it's really easy to get distracted or go, oh, I'll do. And I didn't, I really wanted to give it my all. And so, it requires a lot of self-discipline to sit down every day when everything inside of you doesn't want to be sitting there, and facing yourself when everything inside of you doesn't want to be facing yourself. And I could have laid on the bed. I didn't, I sat in that chair. And it is, it's so hard. So day 4, he introduces you to an addition to the technique. And this is where it starts getting very torturous and deep. At this stage, along with your focus being on your inhale and your exhale through your nose, you now start taking your awareness through different parts of your body in a system, like in a row. It must stay in that same row every single time, to sense or try to be aware of different sensations on the body. So, I would start with the top of my head, then my eyes, my nose, my chin, my neck, the back of my neck, the front of my area, the back area, each points on each arm, down the front, points on each leg, down. And you have to obviously maintain your focus as you go through it, which is you'd go off on something and then come back. And you have to focus on even feeling the slightest sensations. This is to get you to get, like he says, to the deepest depths of your mind and the deepest sensations in your body. And as you start to tune into, he calls them the really gross sensations like pain, as you begin to sharpen your mind, you start to get to the more subtler sensations where you start to feel more of like vibrations. But as you do that, all the sankharas that you've built up, not just in this lifetime, but in other lifetimes will come up. Now, what are sankharas? Like I said, every negative thought you've ever thought about yourself or someone else, every negative emotion you've ever felt about yourself or anyone else. They call them defilements of the minds. So any pain, anger, resentment, sadness, fear, grief, any of those lower states, at any moment, at any time in your life, they will all come up. And that's the point. The whole point is purification of the mind at the deepest level. So how I can think to it, the best way to explain it is like, if you can think of quadrant 1 and 4, or basically the conscious part of your mind. Quadrant 1 and 4 is the conscious part of your mind, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your mind. Underneath that is quadrant 2 and 3, which is the unconscious, the limbic system. It's like where I is formed, right? I as in your identity, your personality. It's, you guys all know, it's where all the imprinting starts, where you give meaning to everyone and everything and every sensation. It's where you give meaning to sensation. And then underneath that is the amygdala, so what they call the reptilian part of the brain. That's where the fight or flight system lives, the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So that's the deepest system, the oldest system. That's the system that drives survival and drives evolution so that we continue to survive as a human. It's the drive that makes us want to survive as a human. This process is taking you even underneath that, because what they say is even the craving to have any human experience is what's keeping you trapped in the loop of reincarnation. And that you have to remove all sankharas to get underneath that so that you no longer crave any sensation. It goes much deeper than this. I'm giving you a very brief description. And there's a lot more to it. I'm just trying to give a broad understanding. So basically you are getting to the point where you're surpassing everything that makes you human, basically. But they believe that's what leads to enlightenment, and that is the purpose, and that is the point, is reaching enlightenment. But that will take, as they say, many, 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 many lifetimes. But at least in each one you start, because you're planting a seed for the next. Because they believed, like many other traditions, that whatever feeling, whatever mental state of mind and emotional state you're in the moment you die is going to lead directly into the next life. Like that moment is coming with you in the next life, and you'll keep creating that until you can get rid of that and get off the cycle of reincarnation and remove all of those sankharas. And so the deeper that you go, then the process in your daily life is not building any new sankharas. So again, any defilement of the mind, so anything negative you think about someone else, any negative emotion you hold on to, any emotional reaction, you have to let it go, or it will stay and build, and at some point you'll have to deal with that. And so this is getting to like the deepest, deepest, deepest depths, because they believe that's where craving and aversion starts. And as you go through this process, the whole point is they want you to see it happening in your own body. They want you to experience the truth of this in your own experience, in the framework of your body. So as you're starting to go through the sensations, you will start to notice your mind craving like a good feeling and averting from a bad feeling. And that good and bad feeling obviously is based on our senses. And this is what we do our whole life. We make decisions based upon craving and aversion. And really, when you go through this process, you see that. I saw that almost every decision I was making every single day was in some form of craving or aversion, craving some good feeling and averting from some bad feeling. Everything we do. And you see the absurdity of it. And you see the absurdity of the illusionary mind games and imagination of mind games that your mind just makes up, and then your body feels, and this cycle, and then you believe the mind, and you just see the madness of it all, really, because you're experiencing it and you're watching it. And so I knew he said day 6 would be tough, and oh boy, was it. Day 6 was probably the deepest hell I've ever experienced. So when the sankharas would come up, it wasn't like anything I experienced before. They would come up as very physical sensations. So it would be a wave of panic, of terror, of absolute fear. And it would rush up, and it would feel like a wave, like a tsunami that would just take over. And that's when I would start to feel like I was like losing sense of reality, and like things would get really, like when you're on a psychedelic or when you're feeling very dizzy, I would get very nauseous, very, very nauseous. My hands would sweat, my whole body would sweat. And I would have to just keep my focus on my breath and watch it pass, because that's the other thing that you will learn and that they teach in this process, is that nothing is permanent. Nothing is permanent. And these sensations pass. They all pass, the good ones and the bad ones. And it's the clinging to them that creates suffering. It's the clinging and wanting to have these good sensations and trying to stay away from bad sensations. And that's where suffering happens. And that comes because of your mind making up stories and thinking this is good and this is bad in everything in your life. And when you can clear this from yourself, and when you can do this process of yourself, the byproduct is peace. And because you can watch sensations, you could say emotion, but they say sensations, because all emotions are sensations in the body that you can watch. And if you can hold equanimity through the sensations, they pass. If you cannot try to cling to them or avert from them, they pass. This was sort of cool because I realized in my Healing from Within course that we put together and are now selling, that's actually part of the process in there. So I was like, oh, I was on the right track there according to Buddhism. Part of what I teach in that class is the navigating a trigger process, which is being able to allow the emotion to move through you without attaching a story to it. Because the moment you attach a story to it, it will perpetuate it. And so I was already doing this in some aspects, just not to this deep of a level, which gave me a lot more respect for the process and a better understanding for, now continuing to help people through that process in that course. I can understand that better now and understand what I was onto something there, And so you have to just watch with equanimity as these massive waves of sensations come through your body. And day 6, this was happening constantly. And not only that, what was also happening was intense pain in my back, of course, because like he explained, when they come up, for a lot of people, they'll come up as physical pain that you just have to watch and observe and not react to and let it pass, because it will. And you will see in this process that everything passes. Everything passes. And it was my day of fiery hell. It was very hard. It was the hardest day for sure. I went to bed that night with nothing left in me. In fact, Scott came up as I was laying there and he's like, you do not look good. Like, you look really, really terrible. really bad. And yeah, I had nothing left in me. And then, day 7 was better, and it continued, even though we're not supposed to say, my battery's dying, even though we're not supposed to say like good or bad, or at least cling to the notion of good or bad. I will say that after day 6, it progressively got, the experience got better, in that the sankharas were not, it's like I got pretty deep. And from that, I started to then have moments that I had at Dr. Joe, specifically, my first one that you all know about in the walking meditation. I had one of those moments again where I was just filled with the most amount of love and grace, and, words can't really describe it, sobbing, and just feeling it move through my whole body. And then at that point, I could start to feel that the sensation of the vibration and the pulsating of energy constantly moving through the body, which is pleasant. But again, the point is not to try to create that or to crave that or to hold on to it, to know that that passes too. And throughout this whole process, you do have huge realizations. I had memories and clarity on those memories, and so much made sense to me in my childhood. So much made sense to me as far as my previous life and what I brought into this one, that, my most previous life, and the amount of fear I brought into this one, massive amounts of fear that I had to work through at the deepest level of my brain, at the deepest level of human existence, and work through that fear, and work through the fear of losing my mind, and understanding why that happened at such a young age, why I experienced so much fear at so many realizations. I'm not going to share those all, but just a lot of understanding, a lot of understanding about a lot of things in my life. And by day 10, I knew day 10 they could start talking, and we actually learn a new technique that we add at the end, the last couple minutes of each meditation, and it's called metta, and it's just beautiful. It's about spreading compassionate love to everybody. So in Vipassana, it is all about keeping your focus on the internal structure of your body, and this is the opposite. This is like spreading it out into the world, spreading the compassion and love out into the world. And he does a chant, and, listening to the chant at the end, I can only explain it as like, I felt the most immense amount of, it was as if I could feel Buddhas and Jesus Christ. I say those two because they were two enlightened beings. The amount of compassion that they had for humanity. And it just was overwhelming. You just sob at the amount of compassion that these enlightened beings had and have for us. And so, wow, that wasn't short at all. It was, there's so much more that, whoever I have a conversation with, I'll dive into more. There's so much more to it. So much more to it. It's really hard. I will say it's really challenging coming back from an experience like that, because it's so profound and so deep, and it changes you at such a deep level. But you come back to reality, and everybody's still the same, and everyone still like expects you to be the same, and they're just going through with their life and like waiting for you to come back and do your life with them. And you can't, you can't explain. It's like, I was thinking, I can tell everybody about Paris all day long that's never been there, but it will never be the same as going to Paris. Like, you won't know the actual experience until you go. So it's, that part, as I know from going to Joe, is very challenging, because for me, I did it all alone. I couldn't connect with the people that were there after. And so even though I was here with Scott, he wasn't experiencing it, and I wasn't really talking about it a lot with him. So he doesn't know, so that's the challenging part, is coming back in, slowly integrating back in, and coming back into the world and into a role that, I didn't want to change, like, oh God, I didn't want another experience where I was like, I'm going to have this big experience and then come back and, dramatically change everything. Like, I did not want that again. I was so happy. I told the woman before I left, I was like, I love my life and I love my husband and I love my kids and I love my work. And I just, I love my life. And she was like, you know what? Most people, even people who meditate all the time, can't say that. So that is a great thing, and I think this just obviously helps you see that at a deeper level. It gives you a tool. I mean, I feel like obviously this is a very hard path to continue to walk, to maintain that equanimity and balance, no matter what sensations are happening in your body, and focusing on your breath all of the time, no matter what. So you're like in a walking meditation all the time, not letting your mind go anywhere else but the present moment is extremely challenging. It is a noble path for sure. I do feel like I could probably easily see myself becoming like a nun or a monk, because it is easy for me to, just be in my own internal space. And even turning on the phone yesterday was like, ooh, I ended up deleting most of the apps on my phone because I was like, I just don't. It's so easy to get distracted nowadays away from this. And that again is the most challenging part, is trying to explain it, trying to stay steady to the things that you learned and what you experienced, and hold on to that while going back into a world filled with everyone that just wants you to go hurry up and, get back to, being you or whatever else. So there will be some changes I make, not too drastic of the ones this time, because this isn't like that. It's just, it's a technique that anyone can use. So with that being said,
Okay, so now that you went through and listened to the entire experience, like I said, there's a few things that I wanted to add on to the end here, because my intention was just to share that with family and friends. But now that I'm sharing it on the YouTube channel, I figured it would be helpful in speaking to the public to mention a few things. And so the first thing I don't want to forget, I forgot to mention in the video, is I did talk about the importance of that self-awareness and that discernment for yourself. And that's something that they teach, is wisdom. And wisdom is really knowing yourself really, really, really well. And so I talk about this a lot actually in people that I work with and people that I coach. In order to know yourself, you have to get to know that line between needing to push yourself past your comfort zone, but also not pushing yourself so far that you end up doing damage. So you have to know within yourself that very thin line. Now, I've done a lot of work on myself over the last 10 years of this journey, and I know myself pretty darn well. And I think that was my biggest surprise in that whole experience, was actually that sense of discernment that was like, I don't need to do it in this way, but I can go home and do it in a way that's helpful for me, that still takes care of myself, but still being able to do, because I wanted to experience it. I wanted to experience the benefits, but I knew in that environment and in that way was not healthy actually for me. It would actually do more harm than it would good. And so you have to know that line within yourself. And I say that because after only 2 days there, and so you only eat breakfast and lunch, you don't have dinner. Breakfast is really light. I'm usually not a breakfast eater. I usually only eat lunch and dinner actually. And it's vegetarian, so there's no meat. So just in those 2 days that I was there, I lost 4 pounds, which I'm a pretty small person anyway. So 4 pounds was quite a bit. When I got home, on top of the very big energetic stuff that was happening in me, it burns a lot of calories. And so I felt that sort of weakness when I got home. And so for that reason alone, I was like, geez, had I stayed all 10 days, I'd have probably been a skeleton, because also during the breaks, I was walking a lot because there's nothing else to do. So I was walking the grounds. So knowing yourself, having that inner wisdom is so important. And that's actually one of the things that I really resonated with in the teachings of Goenka, is that importance of wisdom and knowing yourself. And, it's like I always say, if somebody has a cancer diagnosis, yet they believe that they can heal themselves without traditional Western medicine, there is no harm in doing both of those things. It's why, I'm really passionate about teaching the blending of science and spirituality, because I think using both is really important. So, even though I wanted to experience the results, I had to figure out a way to do it that was safe for me. So again, with a cancer example, if somebody has some doubt, maybe I think that they should do both. They should, maybe do both chemo, but then also do the work, the inner work on themselves, the meditation, whatever it is that they believe will help them cure it and heal themselves from that. So it's really important to know that aspect, especially going into an environment like this. And like the teacher told me, it isn't for everyone. It is incredibly intense. And so being sure that you're listening to yourself while still pushing yourself, because like he said, of course, you're going to want to give up. Of course, your mind, there were many, many, many times throughout, those 7 days at home that I wanted to quit, that I wanted to say, I can't do this, where I was physically just drained and didn't want to do it. But I knew that at that point I could push myself a little further. And so you want to be able to push yourself, because your mind and your body is going to want to give up. You just can't push yourself so far that, like I said, you end up doing damage. So that is a really important aspect if you're considering this, is just to understand that going in is like, I want to push myself, but I also have to have my own discernment and my own wisdom. And I think that's so important in anything that you're doing. And again, they teach this. Do not give your power away and just believe some guru or some, spiritual teacher because they tell you to. Have discernment, have, critical thinking skills, and ask questions, and then be able to experience it for yourself instead of just listening because they tell you to listen. So that's the real true spiritual path, is to know thyself and to know, to get the information, but then take that information internally and use it to find out more about yourself. So that was really important for me to say. I want to make it very clear that I recommend a Vipassana retreat to every single person on this planet. Literally. I think that the technique alone, whether you want to take it all the way towards enlightenment, whether you want to live it like, to the purest form every single day, or whether you just want a really helpful technique that will help you in your life with, emotional resilience, with being able to stay balanced, with being able to experience a consistent state of peace and harmony, which is, an aspect of what we teach in our work, then it's a really helpful technique, regardless of what you believe in. You don't need to believe in anything in particular. You don't need to believe in anything at all. You will have the experience. The hard thing is that I don't know that everyone sort of has that commitment or drive, or I don't know what the word is, but that thing that is required in order to make it through really tough moments. I don't know that everybody has that, which is a bummer, because everyone could experience this. So that sort of leads me to the last thing that I want to add, which is, a big aspect of the technique and a big aspect of what you're learning is to learn the skill of allowing, I'll say emotions, they just call it sensations, to move through your body unimpeded, not trying to resist them, not trying to create them, because that just keeps you in that craving aversion cycle, but to actually just allow the sensations to move through you, to not act upon them vocally or physically is what they talk about. So, if you're having the sensations of anger move through your body, to be sure not to go and yell and scream at somebody, but to allow those sensations to move through you. The aspect of that, why I wanted to share that, is because that is in total alignment with what my husband and I teach in one of our online courses called Healing from Within. And literally the process that we walk people through is to get to a place where they can do that, where they can actually learn the skill of allowing when they're triggered, and some deep, sankara is what they call it, but some deep trauma or some deep emotion is rising to the surface, to actually learn how to give your body the space to feel that so that it can move through you. So I bring that up because if you are somebody that's watching this, that's like, I don't know if I'm prepared to do, this 10-day boot camp pretty much. However, I do see the benefit in my life of learning how to go deep, deep, deep within the emotional body so that I can clear a lot of that junk out. I highly recommend, I'll put a link in the description, that you check out our Healing from Within online course, because it's only 4 modules. You do it all on your own. You can do it from home. However, you then get to join our community so that you can actually experience, some of the benefits of learning the skill of being able to allow emotions to pass through your body so that you can navigate life without all that tension and fear and anxiety and stress, so that you're not adding any more, but not having to go away for 10 days in a really intense experience to be able to gain those benefits. And so that's really important to me because, like I said, I want people to experience the benefits of emotional freedom, but not everyone is prepared to do that. And so, like I said, I was really happy to see that a big aspect of what they're teaching is in direct alignment with what we were already teaching in this course. So please, if you are watching this and you see the benefit of gaining techniques to learn how to have more emotional stability, emotional regulation, emotional freedom, then check out our online course, because it could be very, very helpful and very, very effective for you. As I said, you can do it from home. And walk you through very specific techniques so you know exactly what you're doing. Not only, like I said, to understand where these sort of deeper, they call them again sankaras, but emotions or traumas, to go deep within them so that you can free yourself of them, but then also the process of not taking any new ones on so that you can move through your life, like I said, with more ease, with more peace, with more equanimity and balance, with more harmony, without such extreme highs and lows, without allowing your emotions to just completely take over you and emotionally react to everything. Those are all the benefits that you're going to experience from taking that online course. So I highly recommend that you check that out. Now, I'll wrap this up with saying, like I said, if you're thinking about Vipassana, do it. Just be prepared and just understand that, number one, if you're somebody that has already done a lot of work on yourself and you have what I call a really thin veil, just remember that going into it, that meditating for 11 hours a day is going to activate your pineal gland. They would never talk about pineal gland. They don't talk about anything like mystical or anything like that, but that is an aspect of my own experiences and what we teach. So just be prepared that your pineal gland, if you are somebody that does this work, and if you're somebody that has worked on, activating your pineal gland, that because you're 11 hours a day in meditation with your eyes closed, your pineal gland directly impacts your sleep and wake cycle. And so if you're almost like tricking your brain into thinking that you're asleep a lot, it's going to activate that pineal gland, is what happened with me. And because mine was already very activated and I had a thin veil, it was so much, it was too intense for me. So just remember that going into it, that actually if you're someone that's done a lot of work, that can happen. And be prepared. Like I said, these things are meant to come up and they're going to come up, but there is a process, trust our process, that you can get through it. And so, like I said, just understand that going into the process. Again, this is way too long. I hope this was really helpful for you. Please ask questions in the comments. Like if I didn't answer any of your questions and you've been doing some research and looking into it, and I didn't answer some specific question you have here, please be sure to put that in the comments. I'm also going to link the website to the Goenka specific Vipassana. There's other Vipassana things out there, but Goenka is said to be the purest form and the truest form, like the teachings actually from Buddha. So I will put a link because I would recommend him of all the others. I definitely would recommend it. So I'll put a link to that in the description, as well as a link to our online course as well. I hope you enjoy this. Let me know. I'll see you guys next time.